Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Bruce.
And I'm Josh, and we're your farm management hosts. Let's get started.
Josh, we're getting into wintertime this part of the year, and it's something I always look forward to. And I just wonder, what are you looking forward to the most here in our winter months in Ohio?
It's going to be a long winter down here. We've got a lot planned here in Jackson County. We've got Master Gardener Volunteer Program. So the Jackson County's never actually had that program. So we're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort trying to build that program from the ground up and get something that we can get volunteers out in the community teaching gardening because we've got a lot of interest down here in Jackson County. So I'm really excited to get that program up and going. Bruce, what do you got going on?
Well, that's awesome. That's great to start new programs and really interact with new people in the community and having more volunteers to do more extension related work. That's awesome, Josh. I'm looking forward to traveling across the state of Ohio teaching farm accounting with my favorite software, Quicken. It's not QuickBooks. It's not the real super duper expensive, fancy accounting software that farms may have or think they should have. But Quicken is, I think, a good price point software for somebody that wants to do a cash accounting system that can keep records for income and expenses and really track it to enterprises and really do, gosh, at a minimum, a tax return at the end of the year. But we really want people to do more than just a tax return from their farm accounting. So doing 7 of those workshops across Ohio and really a variety of locations, kind of got them spread out. And we're actually going to highlight one in Summit County for urban ag interests and devoting our examples in class to the urban ag producers that we have across Ohio. But Summit County is going to host that one. Looking forward to all 7 of those across Ohio.
Well, that sounds exciting, Bruce. Today we actually have Dr. Logan Minter. He grew up in rural Pike County, Ohio, and completed his graduate training at the University of Kentucky. He is currently an associate professor in the OSU Department of Extension and associate faculty with the Department of Horticultural and Crop Sciences, statewide field specialist for specialty crops, and the Ohio Integrated Pest Management Program. Man, that's a lot of words.
That's a ton.
Additionally, he leads the Ohio State Digital Ag Programs, E+ efforts. Dr. Logan Minter's research and extension program focuses on increasing overall sustainability of specialty crop systems through fine-tuning management and exploring new enterprises and approaches. Logan, we're happy to have you today.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be here as well.
So, Logan, can you explain what are specialty crops and what makes them so special?
So that's a question I get a lot asking about, what are specialty crops? A lot of people are familiar. They think of Ohio farmland. They picture corn and soybeans, maybe wheat or alfalfa, forage crops, things of that nature. And basically, specialty crops are anything else but. So they are the non-agronomic crops, the things that are not sold as commodity crops. These include things like fruits, all different tree fruits, your berries, small fruits, vegetables of all different kinds, all the different types of things that are used for spices and flavoring, garlics and herbs and things of that nature, and even things that we don't necessarily eat, like ornamentals and crops that are grown for aesthetic value, all fall under this kind of big umbrella of specialty crop. And even some non-plant things like mushrooms still fall into that category as well. So basically, as long as it doesn't move around as some kind of livestock or swim as a fish, or fall into one of those commodity crop categories, it rests as specialty crop. So it's a very diverse group of things, and as a whole, they add a lot to Ohio's ag economy.
That's a huge umbrella, and I bet that's pretty busy space underneath that umbrella that covers all those crops that you just described. And as a farm management podcast, we often talk about farm income and ways. I'd love to hear more about how would a specialty crop really be helpful to boost maybe some farm income, and why should someone even consider that type of diversification?
Kind of hit the nail on the head there with diversification. That's one of the main reasons why I encourage folks to think about specialty crops is when you think about farm income or any kind of income, diversification of your portfolio is usually a pretty solid thing to do. Whether it's our retirements or things of that nature, we think about, okay, how do we hedge our bets? And the nice thing about specialty crops is they oftentimes are grown on smaller acreage. You have a smaller area, but the economic yield potential for that small area can be quite large. especially if you start looking at it in comparison to enterprise budgets for things like corn or soybeans. The kind of the magic there is larger acreages to kind of make up for that. So specialty crops give you this opportunity to add something a little different. And one of the reasons why a lot of folks are interested in it is if they're looking at their farm succession, additional generations coming back to work on the farm. It's like, okay, how do we carve out an income for somebody? Maybe it's a child that wants to come back and work on the farm. And you look at the current income from what is corn, soybeans, or something else, and it's like, it might be hard to dig out an income here. But if we take a little bit of that area and put it into something else that can yield a little more potential, then things can work out a little bit. So that's actually one of the reasons why a lot of people find some value in diversification with specialty crops is to add a little different element or stability in times where those markets for our commodity crops can be so affected by things at the international level even.
So, Logan, you talked a lot about different ways to add diversity to the farm. What are some more options where you can add more income to that farm?
So there are a lot of different options. The thing about specialty crops is the sky's kind of the limit as far as scale and option. We talked earlier about that umbrella, all the different things that specialty crops encompass. So you've already got the diversity piece and then also the scale piece. We have growers across Ohio that grow specialty crop on a square foot basis down, just very tiny little spots, even in urban environments in places you wouldn't think of, old warehouses and repurposed barns on rural farms to absolutely huge acreages, just depending on where you are and what you're looking at. So there are a lot of different options there in that case, both in scale and scope and also type of work. And those inputs will vary, and there's a lot of different considerations to be had there. At the end of the day, there's lots of different possibilities.
So how do I get started? That's a great idea. Maybe I want to experiment a little bit. What are some of my options? It sounds easy conversationally, but
Mhm.
how do I get started? I'm already doing something on the farm, but I know I need maybe to try something different. How can I experiment? See what fits?
So there's several different things, and I talk to farmers about this. For one, we have OSU has a number of different experiment and extension stations around the state where we grow specialty crops for research or in combination for demonstration. Reaching out to myself or your local educator and kind of saying, hey, is there something I could see? Or check and see if there's any neighbors that are growing anything. What their challenges and successes might have been. Again, we're reaching out through extension could be a great way to make those networks. Grower groups and other commodity groups around the state can also help make those connections. So I think that's the first thing is looking at what other folks have done. Now it's not a guarantee one way or the other. If you talk to someone, say, "Hey, I made all this money," it's not a guarantee that you might necessarily do so. And if somebody didn't have a good experience, doesn't mean that necessarily that's going to be a blow every time. There are obviously caveats with that, but that's a good place to start to kind of get a little taste for what options might be out there or some of the nuances, like, what kind of equipment do I need? Because there are different types of very important nuances to be considered when growing specialty crops. They're different, even amongst themselves, they're different, and they're different than, we might commonly think of.
So, Logan, let's say I want to dive right in to hop production. I really want to grow some hops. What are some unseen production risks that I might not think about?
So that's a great question, Josh. And actually, it's that unfortunately, I get a fair number of calls where someone has done just that. They call me and they said, "Hey, I've planted 3 acres of X, hops or lavender or something, and what am I going to do with it? How do I make money on it?" I'm like, what was your plan?" "I don't know. I thought I'd grow it, it'd be like the field of dreams, grow it and the market will come." That's not the case. In the case of agronomic crops that are sold as a commodity, you can offload them at a, co-op or some kind of place to take those in. With specialty crops, we always tell folks to make sure to think about what's your market first. What are you going to do with this stuff? How are you going to sell it? Who's going to buy it? Nail that down. Not just, hey, you think someone would buy this? Oh, sure, maybe somebody would buy it. I don't know. Right? Bruce, you want to buy some pawpaws? I don't know. Maybe. So you have to figure out what that market is, and doing that market analysis is an important piece of getting started. And then working with folks from farm office and others of us in extension to kind of figure out, okay, what's the cost going to be up front? Because a lot of specialty crops have big upfront cost, investment, and you might have to be patient. Something like hops, as Josh mentioned there, they have a large infrastructure you have to put in to buy specialty equipment, special insurance that can cost more because you have to be up 20 feet in the air to harvest the things. And it takes 3 years before you're actually even going to see a hint of a profit, before you're actually getting enough yield to even start paying back the expenses, which is okay if you're willing to wait. Now, once you've got that past that process, the return per acre can be really good. You can, make some pretty high value returns on that investment if you're patient. It's not a get rich quick scheme in many cases. That's just something to kind of think about there as far as unforeseen production risk would be that understanding your market, understanding what your investment means, and the effort it takes to go into it. Hops is kind of a fun example. I talked to a lot of growers that said, "Oh, I want to grow hops." Well, why do you grow hops? Well, I like to drink beer. Well, growing hops is a lot harder than sitting around drinking a beer, and people realize that once they're into it. It's like, oh, this is I'd rather just sit and have one. So it can be quite the wake up.
So, Logan, what are some common surprises growers just might run into? And you've talked to a lot of producers and a lot of different crops over the years. And again, what are some of those surprises that you get pulled into their conversations about?
There's a couple different categories. There's some of those things that you can somewhat plan for in advance, and it's what I alluded to just a moment ago, is that, you might get surprised by, oh, no one wants to buy raw hops at the farmer's market, or no one wants to, there's really not a need for, 3 tons of lavender here today, or whatever the case might be, or 6 bushels of pawpaws, whatever it might end up being. So that's one surprise, but you can kind of plan for that one by checking your markets first, by doing your analysis, by planning. The unforeseen surprises usually come from nature, and those are usually caused by drastic swings in climate, crazy weather events, sometimes new pests. We get invasive pests that pop in that can sometimes be quite devastating. Sometimes things like insecticides and other pesticide labels can change. That's been recently a big concern with the new EPA regulations and on pesticides. And the labels are a little more limited. You don't have as many product options as you would for, say, field corn for lots of different reasons. So, those are some of the things that people run into, and some of those you can plan for, and some of them are kind of hard to predict. That's one of the reasons why they serve as a great diversification tool on the farm, especially if you have multiple types of specialty crop, because again, even within the specialty crops, then you have a hedging of bets. One thing doesn't do well for a year because of pollination or a pest issue. Hopefully something else can kind of help pick up some of the slack.
Logan, it mentions in your bio something about E plus. Can you tell us what E plus is and why a producer might be interested in reading that specific publication?
E Plus is a relatively new initiative at Ohio State. Builds on the programs in our digital ad program, eFields and eBarns, which began, I think, in 2017 and 2022, respectively. These are on-farm research programs. These are aimed to help farmers answer a question. A lot of times farmers have a question, say, hey, I wonder if this would work better. And the challenge is, you might be tempted to say, well, I'll just try it this year. I'm going to try this new amendment or try this new insecticide. I'm going to spray the whole field with it. And then at the end of the year, you have to ask yourself, whether your decision making is, did it work? Whether we're talking about pests or finances or fertility, did it work? Did it do anything? If you sprayed the whole field, it's kind of hard to tell. It's like, I don't know. Or maybe I sprayed half the field, but then I don't know. Is it just that part of the field wetter? Was it better? I don't know. So what we do with applied research is we help growers structure the experiment in a way to tease out those actual differences by replicating and randomizing how we put those treatments down. So that's kind of the basis of our experimental design. So E plus comes into the equation as a way for all other areas of ag and natural resources to have some support from extension and from our research professionals at Ohio State in areas of produce, landscape, urban, and specialty crops. That's where the E plus comes from. And it's dedicated to kind of advancing our production, our commercial horticulture, as well as wide use of natural resources through doing this on location research. So both on farms as well as in forests and other natural landscapes to try and figure out, okay, what's the best way forward to do things, and doing it hand in hand with our farmers and land managers and producers of all different kinds to really aim at increasing sustainability.
And Logan, to go a little further, it looks like E plus, the plus stands for, of course, it's university. We have an
Mhm.
acronym. So plus is produce, landscape, urban, and specialty crops is what makes up that plus E or that E plus area of work that you do. And you've mentioned a few enterprises in our conversation today, lavender, pawpaw. hops. And so, I call you and you're heading somewhere across the state of Ohio to a research farm. What are some other crops that you are involved in or you take questions on to give confidence to growers that are maybe listening that say, wow, does Ohio State work in this area of what I'm thinking of? And so what other commodities do you work in or crops, specialty crops?
My goal is to be accessible for farmers that want to do any kind of specialty crop. And myself, I've done a lot of work with vegetables and some small fruit and tree fruit to some degree. But the other part of my job is to connect our growers with our state specialists and other specialists at Ohio State and elsewhere to make sure to find those answers. If it's something I don't have directly, we'll try and figure it out. Or maybe it's something we can set up as an experiment to figure out through something like Eat Plus, where we say, all right, we're not sure. Science doesn't actually have an exact answer for you. Let's find it out together.
It sounded like you have a heavy lift in this space, but it sounds like you also have a network of additional state specialists across the OSU and maybe some other universities that you work with as well to answer some questions and be resource.
Yes, yes. So especially in my role as pest management coordinator, we have folks all across the major departments at OSU, as well as our partners at Central State University and a multi-state network that we work with in that space. So as far as specialty crops goes, it's a very broad net of folks to bring in, which is, I think, beneficial for all of us.
Just wrapping up our time here, with any final thoughts that you have kind of in this space of specialty crops and the work that you're doing and you hope people are thinking about across the state of Ohio as they look at diversification on the farm?
Well, it's something that I hope people think about and think about the future of their farm and planning. It's like if they're wondering, okay, how do I keep this sustainable, truly sustainable to make it something that's beneficial to people, to the farm family, to the folks that are involved in it, something that's sustainable for the future of the profit, and then also the planet. That's where I think specialty crops can have a little special niche to help balance those pieces out. There's a number of different things they do in all those different spaces.
Thanks for listening today.
For more information about farm management tips, be sure to check out the Farm Office at farmoffice.osu.edu.